The worst day of my life wasn't the day my parents died. It was the day my brother looked me in the eyes and let me believe he had stolen everything. If you've ever had someone you trusted become a stranger overnight, then you'll understand exactly how this story begins. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 42 years old. And for more than 20 years, I carried a hatred so heavy that it almost became my identity. I believed my older brother destroyed our family. I was wrong, but I didn't learn the truth until one letter changed both our lives forever. It all started on a cold October morning in Cedar Ridge, a quiet town in northern Vermont where everyone knew everyone else's business. Our parents, Grace and Margaret Carter, had spent 35 years building a simple but beautiful life. Dad owned a small woodworking shop that smelled of fresh cedar and varnish. Mom taught third grade at the local elementary school, where generations of children still remembered her warm smile and gentle voice. We weren't rich. We weren't famous. But we were happy. At least that's what I believed. Growing up, my brother Daniel was my hero. He was 5 years older than me, tall, confident, and fearless. If someone picked on me at school, Daniel somehow found out before I even got home. "You mess with Ethan," he'd tell them. "You answer to me." No one ever tested him twice. When Dad worked late in the shop, Daniel helped me with homework. When I learned to ride a bike, he ran beside me until I didn't need him anymore. "Don't look back," he'd shout. "I'm right here." For years, I believed he always would be. Then life changed. Daniel earned a business degree and moved to Boston after college. He quickly found success working for a real estate investment company. Promotions came one after another. Meanwhile, I stayed close to home. I became a paramedic because I wanted to help people the way others had once helped our grandparents. The distance between us wasn't caused by anger. It was simply adulthood. Different cities. Different careers, different lives. Still, every Thanksgiving and Christmas we came home. Mom insisted on cooking. Enough food for 20 people even, though only 4 of us sat around the dining table. Dad carved the turkey. Daniel always stole the last dinner roll. I always complained. Mom laughed every single time. If I had known those moments were numbered, I would have memorized every detail. The sound of her laughter, the smell of cinnamon in the kitchen, the way Dad pretended not to notice Daniel sneaking pie before dinner. Then came October 18th. I remember because every year since I wake before sunrise without meaning to. That afternoon, I was halfway through a 12-hour shift when dispatch called. Multiple vehicle collision on Interstate 89. We raced there with lights flashing. I had responded to hundreds of accidents before. Nothing prepared me for this one. The silver SUV crushed beneath a delivery truck looked familiar. Too familiar. As I climbed out of the ambulance, I saw Dad's favorite fishing sticker still attached to the rear window. My legs stopped working. Someone beside me was talking. I couldn't hear the words. I only heard a ringing sound that swallowed everything else. Another paramedic gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "Ethan!" He didn't need to finish. I already knew. My parents were gone. The funeral drew nearly the entire town. Teachers, neighbors, customers from Dad's workshop, former students carrying flowers. The church overflowed with people whose lives had somehow been touched by Grace and Margaret Carter. Daniel stood beside me through the entire service. Neither of us cried. Not because we weren't devastated, because the pain was simply too large for tears. After everyone left the cemetery, Daniel finally spoke. "We'll get through this." I nodded. "We still have each other." He looked away before answering. "I hope so." At the time, I didn't understand why he sounded so uncertain. 3 days later, Attorney William Hayes invited us to his office. It was time to read the will. The office smelled of old books and coffee. Sunlight streamed through tall windows as Mr. Hayes unfolded a thick folder. "Your parents updated their estate plan 5 years ago." Daniel folded his arms. I leaned forward. Mr. Hayes adjusted his glasses. "Your father left ownership of Carter Woodworks and the family home to Daniel." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "The remaining assets, including investment accounts and savings, are also assigned to Daniel as executor." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it couldn't possibly be real. There has to be another page. There isn't. What about me? Silence. I looked toward Daniel. He refused to meet my eyes. Finally, I asked the only question that mattered. So Mom and Dad left me. Nothing? Daniel slowly inhaled. Ethan! No. I stood so quickly my chair crashed against the wall. No, explain this. It isn't that simple. It looks pretty simple to me. Mr. Hayes tried to interrupt. Your parents? I wasn't talking to you. I stared directly at my brother. You promised we'd always be family. I know. You promised. I remember. Then tell me this is a mistake. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, something inside him had changed. There isn't a mistake. Those 4 words shattered 27 years of trust. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you knew? Yes. And you said nothing? I couldn't. You could. I couldn't. His voice remained calm. Mine exploded. You took everything. Ethan! You took our parents home. I know. You took Dad's business. I know. You even took Mom's savings. I know. Every answer sounded like another confession. I wanted him to deny it. I wanted him to tell me there had been an error. Instead, he simply accepted every accusation. Then he reached into his briefcase. I already prepared the paperwork. My stomach dropped. Paperwork? For what? To buy your share. My share. I'll give you $50,000 today. I stared at him in disbelief. You think you can buy me? It'll help you start over. I laughed so hard it almost became crying. Our parents are barely buried. And you're negotiating? I'm trying to do what's best. For who? He didn't answer. The silence told me everything I thought I needed to know. I grabbed the unsigned papers and tore them in half. Tiny pieces floated onto the office floor like snow. You can keep every dollar. Ethan, but don't ever call yourself my brother again. His face finally cracked. Pain flashed across it. Real pain. Yet he still didn't stop me. He didn't fight. He didn't explain. He simply whispered, I'm sorry. Those became the last words we spoke for nearly 20 years. As I slammed the office door behind me, I believed I was walking away from the greediest man I'd ever known. I had no idea that Daniel was silently sacrificing something far greater than money. And somewhere, hidden in a place neither of us expected, my mother's final letter was waiting for the day the truth could finally be told. The drive home from the lawyer's office felt endless. Every mile carried me farther from the only family I had left. In my rearview mirror, I watched the town where I'd grown up disappear behind a curtain of rain. The house where my parents had laughed, argued, celebrated birthdays, and welcomed me home after every difficult day no longer felt like mine. According to the will, it never had. At least that's what I believed. For weeks, my phone buzzed with calls from Daniel. I never answered. He left voicemail after voicemail. Ethan, please call me. We need to talk. I know you're hurting. I'm asking for 5 minutes. I deleted every message without listening to the end. One evening, he showed up at my apartment carrying a cardboard box. When I opened the door, neither of us spoke for several seconds. He looked older already. Not because of age, because grief had settled into his face. I brought some of Mom's things, he said quietly. I don't want your charity. It isn't charity. It belongs to you now, doesn't it? Ethan. I stepped back and pointed toward the parking lot. Leave. I'm trying to... Leave. He looked like he wanted to say something. Something important. Instead, he placed the box on the porch. I'm sorry. Those words again. Always, I'm sorry. Never an explanation. I waited until his car disappeared before kicking the box off the porch. Family photographs scattered across the wet pavement. Mom's favorite recipe book landed face down in a puddle. A framed picture of the 4 of us cracked across the middle. I stared at it for a long time. The broken glass ran directly between Daniel and me. It felt strangely fitting. The next few years were the hardest of my life. Without my parents, the holidays became unbearable. Thanksgiving meant eating takeout alone after a 12-hour ambulance shift. Christmas became just another day on the calendar. I buried myself in work because work didn't ask painful questions. As a paramedic, I saw tragedy almost every day. Heart attacks, House fires, car crashes, children born, lives lost. Helping strangers became easier than thinking about my own family. People often thanked me for saving them. They never realized they were saving me too, because every emergency gave me one more hour when I didn't have to think about Daniel. Meanwhile, everyone else talked about him. You know, your brother bought the old Miller Hotel? I heard Daniel's company owns half the downtown buildings now. Your brother donated $1 million to the Children's Hospital. Each story made me angrier. Of course he could afford to be generous. He had our parents' money, our father's business, our family home. People praised him as if he were some hometown hero. If only they knew. Or so I thought. 5 years passed, then 10, then 15. The silence between us became permanent. Neither of us married. At least not at first. I dated occasionally, but every relationship ended the same way. You never let anyone get close? One girlfriend told me. You keep building walls. She was right. The person who had taught me that family could disappear overnight was my own brother. Trust no longer came naturally. One snowy December evening, I received an unexpected visitor. It wasn't Daniel. It was Emily, his daughter. The last time I'd seen her, she'd been 7 years old. Now she stood on my doorstep as a college student, clutching a small gift bag with nervous hands. Uncle Ethan? Hearing those words almost broke me. I hadn't been called uncle in nearly 2 decades. You've grown up, I managed. She smiled weakly. Dad said you might not answer the door. I almost didn't. I know. Neither of us knew what to say next. Finally, she held out the bag. Merry Christmas. I can't accept this. It's cookies. My grandmother's recipe. I made them. I hesitated before taking the bag. The familiar scent of cinnamon escaped through the paper. For one brief moment, I was standing in my mother's kitchen again. Emily looked at me carefully. Dad still talks about you. I laughed bitterly. Really? Every birthday, every Christmas, every Thanksgiving. He always says the table feels too big. I looked away. Your father made his choice. She shook her head. No, you don't know him anymore. I know enough. You don't. She swallowed hard. He's never stopped loving you. I almost slammed the door. Instead, I asked the question that had haunted me for years. If he loved me, why did he take everything? Emily opened her mouth, then closed it. Tears filled her eyes. I don't know. That answer felt honest. She truly didn't know. Neither of us did. After she left, I opened the gift bag. Inside were warm oatmeal cookies and a folded napkin. On it, in handwriting I recognized instantly, was a recipe copied from my mother's old cookbook. At the bottom, someone had written, "Some things are worth waiting for." No signature. But I knew. Daniel, I crumpled the napkin and threw it into the trash. Or at least I tried to. 20 minutes later, I quietly picked it back out. Another 5 years passed. Life settled into routine. Work, home, sleep, repeat. Until one rainy Tuesday morning changed everything. I had just finished an overnight shift when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Normally, I ignored unknown callers. Something told me to answer. Hello? Mr. Ethan Carter. Yes. My name is William Hayes. The name hit me like a punch. The lawyer. The same man who had read my parents' will 20 years earlier. I haven't heard from you in a long time, I said coldly. I wish I were calling under better circumstances. What do you want? There was a long pause. Then he spoke the words I never expected to hear. It's about your brother. My heart hardened instantly. I have nothing to say about Daniel. I'm afraid this isn't optional. I think it is. Ethan. Another pause. Then, your brother has been diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. Everything inside me froze. The room suddenly felt too quiet. I gripped the kitchen counter to steady myself. How long? According to his doctors, perhaps 6 to 8 weeks. I wanted to feel satisfaction. After 20 years of anger, maybe I should have. Instead, I felt nothing. Or perhaps too much. Mr. Hayes continued softly. Before he dies, there's something your mother wanted you to receive. I frowned. What are you talking about? A letter. A letter? She instructed me to keep it sealed. For 20 years. And to deliver it only when Daniel could no longer protect the secret. The secret. My pulse quickened. What secret? I'm sorry. I promised your mother I wouldn't explain over the phone. Then explain in person, if you're willing. I looked toward the rain streaking across my apartment window. 20 years of hatred, 20 years of unanswered questions, 20 years believing my brother had stolen everything. And now, one letter was about to challenge every memory I had built my life upon. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on anything. I skipped breakfast. I ignored my phone. I sat by my apartment window watching the rain slide down the glass, replaying the lawyer's words over and over. A letter. A secret. Daniel could no longer protect it. None of it made sense. If there had been a secret, why wait 20 years? Why let me believe my own brother had betrayed me? And why reveal it only when he was dying? By evening, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going because I cared about Daniel. I was going because I deserved the truth. The next morning, I drove back to Cedar Ridge for the first time in nearly 20 years. The town looked smaller than I remembered. The diner where Dad used to buy coffee before work was still there. Mrs. Collins' flower shop still stood on the corner. Even the church where we buried our parents looked exactly the same. Only I had changed. As I passed our old neighborhood, my eyes drifted toward the Carter family home. The white porch had been freshly painted. The maple tree Dad planted when Daniel was born stretched high above the roof. I hadn't seen it in 2 decades. Memories rushed back faster than I could stop them. Daniel pushing me on the old tire swing. Mom waving from the kitchen window. Dad teaching us to throw a baseball in the front yard. For a moment, I almost turned into the driveway. Instead, I kept driving. Attorney William Hayes's office hadn't changed either. The same wooden shelves. The same antique clock. The same smell of old paper and coffee. Mr. Hayes looked much older now. His hair had turned completely white, and deep lines framed his tired eyes. When I walked in, he stood immediately. "Thank you for coming." I almost didn't. "I know." Neither of us sat for several seconds. Finally, he motioned toward the chair. "Ethan, before we begin, I owe you an apology." I folded my arms. "For what?" "For keeping a promise that hurt you." I stared at him. "What does that mean?" He opened a locked drawer in his desk. From inside, he carefully removed a large yellow envelope. Across the front, written in elegant blue ink, were 5 words. "For my sons, when the time is right." The handwriting stopped my heart. Mom's. I recognized every curve of every letter. Without realizing it, my hands began to shake. Mr. Hayes gently placed the envelope on the desk. "I've protected this for 20 years. You could have given it to me. I wasn't allowed." "By who?" "Your mother." I frowned. "She made me promise." "Promise what?" "That I would never deliver this letter until Daniel's burden was over." I looked at him in disbelief. "Burden?" "Yes." "What burden?" He sighed deeply. "I can't answer that. You have to read the letter." Slowly. I broke the faded wax seal. Inside was a neatly folded stack of handwritten pages. The paper had yellowed with age. I could almost smell my mother's perfume lingering between the pages. At the top she had written, "My dearest Ethan and Daniel." Tears blurred my vision before I even reached the second line. "If you're reading this," then the promise I asked Daniel to keep has finally come to an end. I know that by now Ethan probably hates his brother. And if that's true, then the blame belongs to me. Not to Daniel. I stopped reading. "No." Mr. Hayes remained silent. I continued. "Daniel begged me not to do this. He told me the truth would destroy your relationship. I told him losing your love was a price I was willing to ask him to pay. He cried that day. I had never seen him cry before. My chest tightened. Daniel. Crying? Over the inheritance? That wasn't possible. I turned the page. Your father never wanted either of you to know this. 3 years before our accident, his business nearly collapsed. To save Carter Woodworks, he borrowed money from dangerous people. He believed he could repay them. He was wrong. I frowned. Dangerous people? Dad had never mentioned financial trouble. To me, the workshop had always seemed successful. The next paragraph made my stomach turn. By the time your father confessed everything to me, we owed more than $800,000. The men who held those debts threatened our family. Not our house. Not the business. Our family. I looked up. This can't be real. Mr. Hayes quietly slid another folder across the desk. Inside were old bank records, loan agreements, collection notices. Everything carried my father's signature. Everything was real. I looked back at the letter. Daniel learned the truth before you did, because he happened to overhear us talking one night. He insisted that you must never know. He said you deserved a chance to live without carrying your father's mistakes. He was only 25 years old. 25. Just a kid, the same age I had been when our parents died. The next sentence shattered everything I thought I knew. After your father and I were gone, Daniel sold nearly everything we owned. Not because he wanted to become rich, because the debt collectors came only 3 days after our funeral. My breathing became uneven. No, that wasn't possible. Daniel had inherited everything. Everyone knew that. Hadn't they? The money from the house, the workshop, our savings. Almost every dollar disappeared, paying debts that should never have existed. I stared at the page without blinking. For 20 years, I had believed my brother became wealthy because he stole from me. What if he hadn't? The next paragraph answered the question before I could ask it. Daniel accepted your hatred because I begged him to. If those men believed you had received part of the inheritance, they would have come after you too. Daniel wanted them looking only at him. He carried that burden alone. A cold chill ran through my entire body. I remembered that day in the lawyer's office. Every accusation, every insult, every word I'd thrown at him. And through it all, he never defended himself. Not once. I whispered, barely able to speak. My God. Mr. Hayes lowered his head. I've waited 20 years to hear someone say those words. I looked at him. So, Daniel never stole my inheritance? Mr. Hayes shook his head. No, Ethan. He protected you. I couldn't breathe. Every memory I had built my life around. Every ounce of anger. Every lonely Christmas. Every unopened voicemail. Every slammed door. Every cruel word. It had all been based on a lie. Not a malicious lie. A sacrifice. And I was only halfway through my mother's letter. Then I noticed one final folded page tucked inside. Across the top, in my mother's handwriting, were 6 haunting words. The hardest truth is still ahead. My hands refused to steady. The final page felt heavier than all the others combined. For several long seconds, I simply stared at my mother's handwriting. The hardest truth is still ahead. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. If everything I had believed for 20 years was already wrong, what else could possibly be waiting for me? Attorney Hayes didn't rush me. The old clock on his office wall ticked softly, each second sounding louder than the last. Finally, I unfolded the last page. My dear Ethan, if you've read this far, then you've learned that your brother never betrayed you. A tear landed on the paper. I quickly wiped it away before the ink could smear. But there is one more truth you deserve to know. The accident that took your father and me was not entirely an accident. My heart stopped. I looked up so quickly my chair scraped across the floor. What does that mean? Mr. Hayes slowly removed his glasses. I was afraid you'd ask. Tell me. He hesitated. Read the rest first. I swallowed hard and continued. The truck driver who hit us had been awake for nearly 24 hours. The police ruled it an accident, but 2 days before we died, your father told me someone had warned him that if he didn't repay the remaining debt, our family would suffer. The room suddenly felt cold. I remembered the police report. Driver fatigue, heavy rain, poor visibility. That was the official explanation. Had there been something more? The letter continued. I don't know whether our deaths were truly accidental or simply a terrible coincidence. Neither does Daniel. And I pray you never spend your life searching for an answer that may never exist. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. For years, I had imagined my parents' deaths as a random tragedy. Now doubt had crept into every memory. Then I reached the paragraph that shattered me completely. Ethan, There is one final reason Daniel accepted your hatred. 3 months before our accident, doctors discovered a serious heart condition in him. What? The word escaped my mouth before I could stop it. Mr. Hayes quietly nodded. He never told you. I looked back at the page. The doctors believed Daniel might someday need major surgery. He didn't want you carrying his burden too. He always believed an older brother's job was to protect the younger one. My vision blurred again. Daniel had been sick, even before our parents died. And I had never known. The next lines felt like knives. If one day Ethan learns the truth, he'll probably blame himself. Please don't. Everything Daniel did, he did because I asked him? My chest tightened. I could barely breathe. For 20 years, I'd blamed him. Meanwhile, he'd been carrying grief, debt, fear, illness, and my hatred. Alone. When I reached the final paragraph, I completely broke down. My greatest wish is not that my sons become wealthy. It's that they become brothers again. If there is still time, please forgive each other. Love always. Mom. The letter slipped from my hands onto the desk. I buried my face in them. For the first time since my parents' funeral, I cried. Not quiet tears, not silent grief. The kind of crying that comes from realizing you've lost 20 years you'll never get back. I called him a thief, I whispered. Mr. Hayes said nothing. I told him he wasn't my brother anymore. Silence. I ignored every phone call. I know. I threw away the pictures he brought. I know. I hated him. My voice cracked. For protecting me. The lawyer leaned forward. Ethan. There's something else. I slowly lifted my head. What? He never sold your parents' house. I frowned. What? He couldn't. I don't understand. He transferred it into a protected family trust. I stared at him. For who? You. The room fell silent again. He paid every tax, every repair, every insurance bill. For 20 years. But why? Mr. Hayes smiled sadly. He always believed that someday you'd come home. A lump formed in my throat. He kept my room? The lawyer nodded. Exactly the way you left it. I covered my mouth. The baseball trophies. The old guitar Dad bought me. The faded college posters. After 20 years, they were still there, waiting, just like my brother had been. Mr. Hayes reached into another folder. There was one thing Daniel asked me to give you if you ever came. He handed me a small key. Old, brass, worn smooth with age. The front door. I stared at it in disbelief. He never changed the locks. As I closed my fingers around the key, my phone suddenly rang. The caller ID read, Emily Carter. I answered immediately. Emily? She was crying. Uncle Ethan? My heart dropped. What happened? It's Dad. I stood so quickly the chair tipped over. What about him? The doctors. They don't think he has weeks anymore. I felt my blood run cold. How long? Her voice broke completely. They're saying, I may be 48 hours. The key slipped from my hand and hit the wooden floor with a sharp metallic sound. For 20 years I had waited for answers. Now that I finally had them, I might already be too late to tell my brother the only words that mattered. I'm sorry. For a moment I couldn't speak. Emily's quiet sobs echoed through the phone. I gripped the edge of Mr. Hayes' desk so hard my knuckles turned white. Which hospital? I finally asked. St. Matthew's Medical Center. In Boston. I'm leaving now. Uncle Ethan? Yes? He keeps asking for you. The words hit me harder than anything else that day. For 20 years, I had convinced myself Daniel didn't care whether I was alive or dead. Now I learned that in the final hours of his life, the only person he wanted to see was me. I'll be there, I whispered. I promise. The drive to Boston should have taken a little over 3 hours. It felt like a lifetime. Rain pounded against the windshield, blurring the highway into streaks of gray. Every mile brought another memory I wished I could erase. The day I tore up the paperwork in the lawyer's office. The birthday cards Daniel had mailed every year. Cards I never opened. The Christmas gifts I returned unopened. The voicemail notifications I deleted without listening. How many times had he tried to reach me? How many times had he almost told me the truth? I would never know. Halfway there, I pulled into a quiet rest stop. For the first time in 20 years, I unlocked an old email account I hadn't used since my 20s. Daniel's name appeared again and again. Hundreds of messages. Most had never been opened. With trembling hands, I clicked the very first one. It had been sent just 2 days after our parents' funeral. Subject: please believe me. Ethan, I know you hate me right now. I understand why. I can't explain yet. But one day I hope you will know that I never stopped loving you. Please take care of yourself. Love, Daniel. My chest tightened. The next message came 6 months later. Happy birthday, little brother. Mom would have made your favorite apple pie today. I still miss her every morning. Another, Merry Christmas. I left something on your porch. Even if you throw it away, I hope you know it came with love. Year after year. Birthday after birthday. Holiday after holiday. He had written, and I had never read a single word. By the time I reached the most recent message, tears blurred the screen. It had been sent only 3 weeks earlier. If you're reading this, then maybe I've finally run out of time. I don't want to leave this world with you believing I betrayed you. If the truth reaches you after I'm gone, don't waste another day carrying hate. It's too heavy. I know because I've carried enough for both of us. I closed my eyes. For 20 years, I had carried anger. For 20 years, Daniel had carried love. I arrived at St. Matthew's Medical Center just after sunset. The hospital lobby buzzed with quiet conversations and the soft beeping of medical equipment. Emily spotted me before I saw her. She ran across the waiting room and wrapped her arms around me. For a second, I froze. Then I hugged her back. I'm so sorry, she whispered. No. I shook my head. I'm the one who's sorry. She looked up at me, confused. You know now? I nodded. Everything. Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. I always knew there had to be more to the story. So did your father. She gently took my hand. He never blamed you. Those words broke something inside me. How? Because he said grief makes good people believe terrible things. Outside Daniel's hospital room, I stopped walking. The door stood only a few feet away. I couldn't move. What if he doesn't want to see me anymore? Emily smiled through her tears. Uncle Ethan? He asked for you every single day. She slowly opened the door. The room was quiet. Machines hummed softly. The curtains were half closed against the evening light. At first, I barely recognized the man lying in the hospital bed. The strong, confident older brother I remembered had become painfully thin. His hair had turned silver. His face looked tired. Fragile. He seemed so small. For 20 years, I had imagined confronting him. Yelling. Demanding answers. Instead, all I wanted was more time. Daniel slowly opened his eyes. For a second, he stared at me as if he thought he was dreaming. Ethan? His voice was barely above a whisper. I stepped closer. It's me. A faint smile appeared on his face. I was afraid I wouldn't get to see you again. I couldn't answer. The words refused to come. He looked toward Emily. Could you give us a minute? She nodded and quietly left the room. Now it was just the two of us. Two brothers, separated by 20 years of silence. Finally reunited by a truth that had come almost too late. Daniel reached weakly toward the chair beside his bed. Sit with me. I sat. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at me with tired eyes. You read Mom's letter? It wasn't a question. I nodded. I'm sorry. Daniel gave a tiny shake of his head. No, I'm the one who's sorry. I leaned forward, tears filling my eyes. You spent 20 years protecting me, and I spent 20 years punishing you. A single tear rolled down Daniel's cheek. I never stopped being your brother. I took his frail hand in mine. For the first time since our parents died, I held my brother's hand again, and I realized something that made my heart ache even more. His grip. The hand that had once steadied my bicycle and defended me on the playground was now so weak that it could barely hold mine. I held Daniel's hand as if letting go would steal what little time we had left. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was the silence of two brothers trying to find their way back to each other. Daniel managed a small smile. You still squeeze too hard? I laughed through my tears. You noticed that? I noticed everything. His voice was weak, but for a split second, I heard the brother I had grown up with. The one who used to race me to the mailbox. The one who taught me to throw a baseball. The one who always let me win at checkers, even though I didn't know it until years later. I missed you, he whispered. Those 3 words shattered the last wall around my heart. I missed you too. I was just too stubborn to admit it. Daniel closed his eyes. I never blamed you. You should have. He slowly shook his head. No, you lost Mom and Dad. You thought you lost me too. Anyone would have believed what you believed. I buried my face in my hands. I called you a thief. I know. I told you that you weren't my brother. I remember. I ignored your calls. I know. I hated you. Daniel reached over with surprising effort and placed his hand on my shoulder. But you're here now. That's what matters. I looked at him in disbelief. How can you forgive me so easily? He smiled faintly. Because Mom taught us something. I frowned. What? When someone you love finally comes home, you don't waste time reminding them how long they were gone. Fresh tears rolled down my face. That sounded exactly like our mother. A gentle knock interrupted us. Emily stepped back into the room, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. She looked from me to her father. For the first time in years, she saw both Carter brothers sitting together. Daniel smiled at her. I told you he'd come. Emily laughed softly through her tears. I never stopped believing. She handed me a cup. As she sat beside her father, Daniel reached for her hand too. One hand held mine. The other held hers. For the first time in decades, our family felt whole again. Later that evening, after Emily went to speak with the doctors, Daniel looked toward the window. The maple tree. I blinked. What about it? The one Dad planted. It's huge now. He smiled. I always thought you'd come back and see it. You kept the house. I couldn't sell it. Not after everything Mom wanted. I looked down. I don't deserve it. Daniel chuckled softly. Neither of us deserves anything. But family isn't something you earn. It's something you choose. I hesitated before asking the question that had haunted me for years. Why didn't you tell me? If Mom hadn't made you promise, oh, would you have? Daniel stared at the ceiling. I almost did. When? The night I brought that box to your apartment. I remembered. The photographs. The recipe book. The picture frame I'd broken. I wanted to tell you everything. So why didn't you? Because the men your father owed were still watching. I felt my stomach tighten. They were? Daniel nodded. For years. I kept thinking that if they believed all the money had come to me, they'd leave you alone. And they did. I couldn't believe it. You carried that alone? He smiled weakly. That's what big brothers do. The room fell quiet again. After several minutes, Daniel spoke. Do you remember the promise we made in the treehouse? I looked at him, confused. The summer I turned 12. Then it came back. Our old treehouse behind the workshop. 2 boys with scraped knees and impossible dreams. We had carved our initials into one of the wooden beams. Underneath them were 5 crooked words. Brothers, no matter what. My throat tightened. I remember. Daniel smiled. I broke that promise. No. I quickly shook my head. I did. We both did. The doctor entered a few minutes later. His expression told me everything before he even spoke. Mr. Carter, I'm afraid the cancer is progressing faster than we expected. Daniel nodded calmly. I figured. The doctor looked toward me. If there are conversations you've been waiting to have, I wouldn't wait much longer. After he left, the room became painfully quiet. Daniel looked at me and smiled. Guess Mom wins.
What do you mean?
She always said life was too short to stay angry. I laughed sadly. She was right. She usually was. Just before midnight, Daniel reached into the drawer beside his bed. With trembling fingers, he handed me a small wooden box. I've been keeping this for 20 years. I slowly opened it. Inside lay Dad's old pocket watch. The same watch I had accused Daniel of stealing. Under it was a folded piece of paper. What is this? He smiled. Open it. I unfolded the note. It was written in our father's handwriting. To my boys, time is life's greatest gift. Don't spend it proving who's right. Spend it loving each other while you still can. I could no longer hold back my tears. 20 years. Gone forever. Daniel squeezed my hand. There is one more thing I need you to do for me. I looked up. Anything. He took a slow, painful breath. I need you to promise. Before he could finish, the heart monitor suddenly began to beep faster. Nurses rushed into the room. The doctor's voice echoed through the hallway. Get the crash cart! I stumbled backward as medical staff surrounded my brother. The last thing I heard before the doors closed was Daniel calling my name. Ethan. Then the doors slammed shut, and I had no idea whether I would ever hear my brother's voice again. The doors to Daniel's room slammed shut. A nurse gently pushed me back into the hallway. I'm sorry, sir. You need to wait out here. I couldn't move. I stood frozen, staring through the small glass window as doctors and nurses surrounded my brother's bed. The steady rhythm of the heart monitor had turned into a frantic chorus of alarms. One doctor shouted instructions. Another began chest compressions. Someone called for more medication. Every second felt like an hour. Emily ran down the hallway, her face pale with fear. What happened? I wrapped my arms around her before I even realized I was moving. I don't know. She buried her face against my shoulder and sobbed. For the first time in 20 years, I wasn't standing alone. Minutes passed. Then 10. Then 20. No one came out. The waiting was unbearable. I remembered another hallway. Another hospital. 20 years earlier. The day a doctor walked toward Daniel and me with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry. We did everything we could. That was the day we lost Mom and Dad. Now history seemed determined to repeat itself. Only this time, I couldn't lose my brother too. Finally, the doors opened. The doctor removed his mask and walked toward us. His expression said everything. We were able to stabilize him. Emily let out a shaky breath. But the doctor paused. The cancer has spread throughout his body. There isn't anything more we can do. He's awake, but he doesn't have much time. You should both go in. Daniel looked exhausted. His skin had grown even paler. The oxygen mask covered part of his face, but when he saw us, his eyes softened. He motioned for Emily to come closer. She held his hand and kissed his forehead. I love you, Dad. I love you more than every building I ever owned. He smiled weakly. And that's saying something. Emily laughed through her tears. You still tell terrible jokes. I learned from Grandpa. For a moment, the room felt almost normal. Almost. Then Daniel looked at me. Ethan. I stepped beside him. I'm here. He nodded toward the wooden box still resting on my lap. There's another compartment. I hadn't noticed it before. Carefully, I turned the box over. A small hidden panel slid open. Inside was a single brass key. What does it open? The workshop. I frowned. I thought it was sold. I bought it back. My eyes widened. What? It took me 18 years. I finally earned enough. I couldn't let Dad's workshop disappear. I stared at him in disbelief. You bought it back? He nodded. I've been restoring it. For us. For us? I hoped. One day we'd work there together again. The tears returned instantly. Even after everything, he had still been planning for a future with me. Daniel reached beneath his pillow and pulled out an old photograph. It was faded around the edges. Two little boys stood in front of a treehouse, smiling with scraped knees and missing teeth. He handed it to me. Remember that day? I smiled through my tears. You pushed me off the ladder. He chuckled softly. You jumped. I was 7. You said you could fly. You didn't stop me. I knew I'd catch you. I laughed for the first time in what felt like years. You actually did. I always would have. His smile slowly faded. Ethan, there's one last promise. I leaned closer. Anything. Don't spend the rest of your life making the mistake we made. I nodded. I won't. If someone you love walks away, you go after them. If you're angry, talk. If you're hurting, say it. Life is shorter than pride. His breathing became slower. more difficult. I wasted 20 years. No. I quickly shook my head. We both did. He squeezed my hand as tightly as he could. Then promise me, you won't waste another day. I promise. I'll keep the family together. I'll take care of Emily. I'll restore Dad's workshop. I'll make you proud. A peaceful smile spread across his face. I already am. The room fell quiet. Daniel looked toward the window, where the first rays of morning sunlight slipped through the curtains. Mom used to say, every sunrise is another chance to start over. He looked back at me. I think she was right. His eyes slowly closed. The heart monitor continued its steady rhythm. One breath, then another. Then silence. A long, unbroken tone filled the room. Emily cried out. I held her tightly as nurses quietly entered. One of them gently placed a hand on my shoulder. I'm so sorry. I looked at my brother's peaceful face. For the first time in 20 years, there was no anger between us. Only love and the heartbreaking realization that we had found each other. Just in time to say goodbye. As I stood beside his bed, I noticed an envelope on the bedside table. Across the front, in Daniel's handwriting, were 6 words that made my heart stop. For Ethan, after I'm gone. For several minutes, I couldn't bring myself to touch the envelope. It sat quietly on Daniel's bedside table. Simple. White. Sealed. 20 years earlier, my mother's letter had destroyed everything I thought I knew. Now my brother had left me one of his own. With trembling hands, I picked it up. Across the back flap was a single sentence. Don't cry because we lost time. Smile because we found each other again. By then, my tears were impossible to stop. Emily stood beside me and gently squeezed my arm. I think he wanted you to read it. I nodded and slowly broke the seal. My little brother, if you're reading this, then you've probably already told me you're sorry. The funny thing is, I've been trying to figure out how to tell you that you never needed to apologize. Grief makes people believe things they would never believe in happier times. You weren't my enemy. You were my little brother who lost his parents in a single afternoon. I understood that from the very beginning. I stopped for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. The words blurred through my tears. I continued. Do you remember teaching me how to fish? I laughed softly. That should say you taught me. Emily smiled. He always mixed up stories. I kept reading. You caught the biggest trout that day, but when Dad asked whose fish it was, you pointed at me. You wanted me to feel proud. You were only 8 years old. That was the moment I realized being your brother was the greatest gift I'd ever receive. A tear landed on the page. Promise me 3 things. First, go home. Not just to the house. Go home in your heart. Laugh again. Invite people over for Thanksgiving. Bake Mom's apple pie even if you burn it. Fill every empty room with life. Second, restore Dad's woodworking shop. Teach children what he taught us. Don't let those tools collect dust. Build something that lasts longer than money. And finally, take care of Emily. She has your stubbornness and my terrible jokes. She'll need her uncle. Just like you once needed your big brother. I couldn't read anymore. Emily wrapped her arms around me. We cried together. Not as strangers. As family. 3 months later, autumn returned to Cedar Ridge. The maple tree in front of our parents' house had turned brilliant shades of red and gold. I unlocked the front door with the brass key Daniel had carried for 20 years. Everything was exactly as Mr. Hayes had promised. Mom's favorite rocking chair still sat beside the fireplace. Dad's old reading glasses rested on the end table. My childhood bedroom remained untouched. Even the faded baseball glove on my shelf was still there. Daniel had kept every promise. Now it was my turn. The next morning, I walked to Dad's old workshop. The wooden sign had been restored. Fresh paint covered the walls. Inside, every tool had been carefully cleaned and organized. Daniel had spent years bringing it back to life. On the workbench sat one final surprise. A framed photograph of the 4 of us. Mom, Dad, Daniel, me. Underneath it was a handwritten note. Welcome home, little brother. I smiled through fresh tears. Thanks, big brother. Over the following months, the workshop reopened. Not as a business, as a free community woodworking school. Every Saturday, children from Cedar Ridge came to learn. Some had lost parents. Some came from difficult homes. Some simply wanted someone to believe in them. I taught them exactly as Dad had taught us. Patiently, kindly, one birdhouse at a time. Above the entrance hung a new wooden sign. The Carter Brothers Workshop. Built on love, restored by forgiveness. Emily visited every weekend. Soon she wasn't just helping. She was teaching younger children, too. One afternoon she smiled at me. Dad would have loved this. I looked around the workshop filled with laughter, sawdust, and hope. No, I smiled. He does. 1 year later, on my parents' wedding anniversary, the entire town gathered beneath the old maple tree. Neighbors, friends, former students, children from the workshop. Attorney Hayes stood beside me with tears in his eyes. We unveiled a small wooden bench facing the sunset. The inscription read, Grace and Margaret Carter. They taught us that love isn't measured by what we leave behind, but by the people we bring back together. Beneath those words was another plaque. Dedicated to Daniel Carter. He carried the burden alone so his brother could live free. As everyone quietly walked away, I remained on the bench until sunset. I took both letters from my pocket. Mom's, Daniel's. The two pieces of paper that had changed my life forever. Looking toward the sky, I smiled. I kept my promise. A cool breeze rustled the maple leaves above me. For just a moment, it sounded like laughter. Mom's gentle laugh. Dad's deep chuckle. Daniel's familiar voice saying, Don't look back. I'm right here. This time I didn't. Because I finally understood what my brother had spent 20 years trying to protect. Not the house. Not the money. Not the workshop. Family. And that's the only inheritance that truly lasts forever. The end. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't wealth. It's the chance to forgive before it's too late.